Luke, I mean, I think the first obvious starting point really is to hear a little bit more about your current businesses and what those businesses do.
Right, absolutely. Great question. So a bit about myself, our company, where we've been, where we are now, and where we're going. So ultimately, we have a company called the Mary Group. When I entered the business, I had plans to expand the family business internationally, right? So I live in Toronto. So a big focus for us was getting into the North American market. Ultimately, I brought that proposal to my dad, who was running Engage at the time, and he said, "All right, let's look for a company within Toronto." So we ultimately landed on Hart Pump, great business, 40-year-old history. The founders, we met them, we aligned very quickly on what are our core values, what are we trying to do here, and ultimately we bought the company. Now
Just
over the
out of
last five,
interest, sorry to interrupt,
Mhm,
Luke. Sorry to interrupt. How long
no
did it
problem.
take you to do the acquisition process from when you to find the company to actually when you walked through the door? How long was that whole process?
So funny enough, finding the company didn't take that long. It was almost like stars aligned, the clouds open. Almost a week of my dad saying, "All right, go and find a pump company." My brother and I, we essentially went out searching and we found a pump company for sale online, just on businessforsale.com, right? So he said, "All right, pump company, that looks like what he's looking for." So we reached out to the owners, we brought that to him, showed financials, everything like that. He says, "Boys, this is a fantastic business. Let's go a little further with this." Now, so that part was pretty quick, and from what I hear from others, we got pretty lucky there. Like it's not often you find one so quick. Um, but then ultimately from that point, it took quite a while. So probably between meeting the owners, signed in the NDA, getting to the point where we even put in an LOI or an offer, that took about another, I would say, 2 to 3 months. And then from the time we signed the LOI, it ultimately took probably about another 6 months to get to the closing period. So all in all, it was about a good year's worth of a process.
And once you'd taken over, how long did you keep the old owners on, or did you get rid? You were obviously had enough knowledge in the business to be able to move straight on.
We actually didn't jump straight into removing the owners. So we kept the existing owners on for about a year. There was three owners, and actually one of them still works with us to this day, about 5 years later. So two of the existing owners, they were ready to retire there at the end of their career. But ultimately, we were new to the Canadian market as well as we were new to Toronto as a whole, right? So we did work it in with them to stay on for a 1 year period, and essentially help us transition and learn the business, learn the industry, and also introduce us to all the contacts and everything. Looking back on it, we probably could have done it in a shorter time frame, but at the time, that 1 year gap really gave us that added level of comfort that we wanted.
So, what was it about the business that you think your dad said this is a great business? Or was it because you guys wanted to move to Toronto and it just happened to be there?
I think it was a bit of both. So the location was definitely convenient. It was, I think, within half an hour, 45 minutes of where we were living at the time. Excuse me. And then ultimately, when we got into the financials, met the owners, and saw sort of the different product lines that the company was offering, it gave us a high level of comfort. So the company reps Armstrong, Barnes, Grundfos, Weg, a few other pump brands in the industry that are quite well known, and they had great relationships with these. So that added a level of comfort, as well as when we dug into the financials. I mean, everything was very steady year over year, great consistent scale sales, and then good profitability around that, as well as they had quite a high level of skilled team members and things like that, as well as one thing that really stuck out was the customer concentration. So no one customer was more than 3% of the overall sales, which ultimately added a level of comfort.
Yeah. So, when you thought of bringing it into starting to build a group, you deliberately kept the brand, the people, the culture separate to your main company.
Yeah,
Why was that? I know why I do it. I'm just curious why you did it.
right. So ultimately, it was the brand value, the name that Heart Pump had. They built that over 40 years. Now, we did think about it. We said, okay, we could bring our brand to the existing company, but ultimately what we were buying was the brand, the relationships that the brand had, the name in the market, and the team associated, right? So we didn't see value in changing that brand because of how well known it was in the industry.
And is that the plan for other potential acquisitions? Is it all about bringing in companies that have that reputation? Or
Yeah,
are you looking for some acquisitions to essentially integrate in a more, complete manner?
I think going forward, it'll likely be a mix of both. We will consider, um, where our brand adds more value or where others add more value to the group. Ultimately, our end goal is to increase the overall value of the group, right? So, let's say we wanted to add a service or an offering to our existing company, and we thought that this brand actually serves better than the existing brand. In that scenario, we might integrate the two on a brand level. Now, there will be other scenarios where we see, okay, that company that we're acquiring, they have a great brand on their own, and they add value even in that brand group. So we have considered even just putting, a Mary Group company and adding the different brands. We're not sure where we landed on that yet, but ultimately the easiest approach is always to keep the existing brand, right? Your customers know it, your employees know it. So that really is in any scenario when we can, that's the best approach for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. Keep the culture as it is because people don't realize how dangerous it is to mess with the culture.
Absolutely.
Brand, yeah, whatever. Yeah, so I'd agree with that.
And are there particular sort of aspects of these businesses that you're looking for in terms of what the sweet spot is, what the sort of differentiators are in some of these businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, ultimately, on the financial level, we're looking at companies anywhere from 2 million to 50 million. We want or we need at least some level of management team in place. It's not necessarily mandatory. Like we're pretty good at building management teams, but we do need at least a core team in place that are doing the day-to-day operations and things like that. Where we add value is really the high level strategic implementing systems processes, identifying where there are gaps in the people and then adding new people to that. So ultimately, similar things to before, we want companies that add value to the overall group, whether it's an additional service offering to our existing customers, as well as a customer mix that we can sort of grow the overall pie together. But ultimately, we're looking for engineering companies, plumbing companies, electrical on the supply side or even on the service. We're very we we put a high level of emphasis on not disrupting our existing customers. So if we were looking at a company and we said, okay, there's a conflict of interest between that company and our existing company, we wouldn't go down it. Ultimately, we see the value in increasing our overall value proposition to our existing customers and the customers of the new businesses we're acquiring. Does that sort of answer your question, Gavin?
So
It does.
effectively, when you've got your current portfolio of products or services, whatever you're doing, when you bring on
Mhm.
another company, you want to be able to upsell and cross-sell to that existing client base without losing them under the
Absolutely.
primary. Yes?
Absolutely. That's exactly where we see a big value add.
And are there certain capabilities, let's say, that you feel would allow you to win more deals, to get more agreements with customers? If so, some of these particular businesses that you're bringing on, as you've described, some of it might be businesses that are more similar than others to what you do currently. But are there certain capabilities that you just think we could do with acquisitions that would give us something extra?
Yeah, absolutely. So on a day-to-day basis, we're questioning all of our people, right? We're questioning our customers, we're questioning our employees, and everyone who sort of has a touch in our company. We're asking them, what more should we be offering? What's working? What's not working? Where can we improve? Right? What's your single best idea? So ultimately, we have a lot of customers who are HVAC, plumbing, electrical supply, as well as contractors, right? So one value-added service there could be supplying HVAC supplies to some of our existing HVAC customers, or supplying plumbing supplies to some of our plumbing customers. on the property management side, it could be, engineering services is interesting to us. We provide a great product mix. So now adding in a value engineering side of things around, energy upgrades or mechanical, changing around the mechanical room. It could even be something as simple as cleaning, right? We're in mechanical rooms every day. Those rooms get dirty. Our customers pay to clean those rooms. So something like that is interesting to us as well.
So taking that to another stage, what would you say are the current strengths and weaknesses of the two companies?
Yeah. So our current strength within Hart Pump, as well as Engage, actually, our deep technical knowledge in one niche. And that one niche is essentially on the Hart Pump side, it's pump services, right? So we focus on commercial buildings. Within that building, there are many different types of equipment, right? We've really narrowed down into one piece of equipment within that building, and the brand and the market, they all know we focus on pumps. If you come to us, we're going to know everything about that little piece of equipment, and you won't have to go anywhere else. So that's ultimately the value that we provide there. Same on the Engage side. So Engage is more on the water treatment, filtration, sewage, pumps. Within those niches, they know that niche better than anybody else in the market. So that's ultimately the value that we have right now. Now, our limiting factor is, we've niched down and we have that technical experience. Our limiting factor is that same niche in itself. That, at some point, the one niche that we focus on, we're too heavily focused on that. So it's now to expand outside that and say, okay, how can we add more value to our existing customers outside of the current niche that we're focusing on?
And how do you think you can help others? Say they're a particular part of their journey, and like when you went to see Heat Pump,
Mhm.
what is it that you actually were you offering? Were they looking for a direct exit, or because one of them stayed on board? So what was
Yeah,
the type of conversation you had with them? Because there was three of them, yeah, and one
yeah,
stayed on board,
really.
one's exited a while ago, and one exited almost straight away, if I remember correctly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there were a few different factors at play there. So one was that, they were all in the one was 50, one was 63, one was 65. Let's go. One might have even been 70. So they were in that range where they were thinking about retirement, looking to retire, right? So the first factor was that, at least two of them wanted to retire and they were planning for the exit around retirement. So we ultimately, gave them a package that suited that need. Now the next one was that, you know, they were running this business day to day and they were very much hands on. So they were fixing pumps. They were doing everything that the business needed. They were coming back at the end of the day. They would fix pumps from 7 to 5, and they would come back at the end of the day and send out quotes and then do invoices, right? So the operational experience um, was a part that was very much dragging them down. They didn't know how to build a team around accounts and how to build a team around quotations and sales and things like that. So that was a part where we added value. We very much have good experience in implementing management teams, putting systems and processes in place. We're not perfect. We do make many mistakes along the way, but that was something that they saw value in working with us, as well as there was three owners, right? So a good thing that Dave Ramsey always says. I don't know if you guys follow Dave Ramsey, but he says anything with two or three heads is usually a bit of a monster, right? So they had they had the three of them all making different decisions, going in different directions, and there was no one person at the top making the final decision or having the final say. So we added that level of, okay, we're going to come in, we're going to be the final say. You guys still have a say, but we're going to make the end decision. So that ultimately helped to grow the company.
And how much of an impact have you had? When did you buy Heat Pump? Heart
We
Pump,
bought
sorry.
Yeah, we bought Hart Pump. April 1st, 2020 was ultimately when we had signed the papers. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but that was right in the middle of COVID time. So we had lawyers, accounts, all that. Everyone was saying, why are you guys doing this? Get out of this deal. Lawyers, they try and kill the deal as much as they can, right? So they were trying to get us out. And we ultimately said, look, we ran the numbers, we ran every scenario. Our worst case scenario didn't look so bad. We could still service our debts and things like that. So we were comfortable with the deal. And yeah, so that was 5 years ago at the time. Ultimately, we ended up, we're we're an essential service, right? There's pumps operating in hospitals, there's pumps operating in schools, all these different things. So we weren't closed down or negatively affected as a result of COVID. If anything, it actually helped us. We were able to get technicians on site faster because there was less traffic on the roads and different little things like that. So ultimately, our net impact, we've doubled the company in the last 5 years. We took a small pump service company. I think at the time we must have had somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 employees. We now have 20 employees, as well as on the revenue and profitability side, we've doubled that along with the headcount. So that's essentially our net impact, as well as, we're not finally at the end where the business operates as an asset and we don't have to be involved. We are still involved to some capacity, but it's getting more and more on the strategic and the more on the high level view of where the company is going and how we get there implementing people. And actually, that's one of the things that Rob has been helping me with on a regular basis, trying to get from that step 3 to step 4.
Yeah, well, I mean, you just read my mind. I was just about to ask you. So effectively, when you took over going back to last week's webinar, we were talking about the 4 stages of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
They were very much a 2 or a 3, so they were very much operationally involved. They didn't have a management structure, so they'd just gone up 1 tier from a solopreneur kind of thing. And then when you
Right.
came in, you put the management team in. So now that you're at least at level 3 possible, and you're sitting at levels 3, 4, as we've discussed many times.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think it's getting those jumps, and quite often when you're looking to buy companies, I find that they're normally sat in between 2 and the 3. Very rarely are they 3 to 4, like you are
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've done a good job of maybe taking it from a 1 or a 2 to now a 3. And we're now at that point where we're trying to push into the 4. Obviously, there come hurdles within that in itself, but I think we're doing a pretty good job to be at that 4 level, and that's ultimately the end goal of where we're shooting for.
That's very good. So just a matter of interest, with the guy that stayed on board, have you put him as a share? Is he remained as a shareholder? Is he operationally
No, he's
involved?
actually he's operationally involved. So he was a technician, right? Um, and ultimately that was his forte, right? He fixes pumps, he deals with customers, things like that. That's where he was most happy. That's what he enjoyed doing. He did want a full exit, the same as the other 2 wanted, the other 2 owners. And ultimately, his end goal was just to, he enjoyed being a technician when he started his career. He'd like to just finish his career at that technician level. So we kept him on. He's one of our lead technicians. He helps train and mentor the rest of the technicians, as well as do some service work himself. And we've ultimately just, kept him on as a salary, kept him happy. We ask him questions all the time. Look, you used to own this business. What are we missing? What are you seeing that we're not seeing? I had that conversation just this morning with him, actually. What's working? What's not working? What's your one idea that can help us improve the company? And it's worked quite well so far.
Yeah, I mean, it lines up with the 3 stages of synergy groups. As you know, stage 1 is inside, getting under the bonnet, understanding where the business is, getting all those, the organic growth plan, inorganic growth plan, what you're going to acquire next to bolt on to it, the transition
Yeah.
plan, which you've done for the owners, and getting that valuation up as much as you can, putting it into the group and recycling that whole thing as you go to the next level. So what's
Yeah.
your next kind of targets? What size? I mean, because obviously that was quite a, relative to your other company, it's quite a small acquisition, wasn't it, if I remember rightly? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's roughly about half the other
what's your
company.
ideal price point for, or size of company that you're going to hit next?
Yeah. So good question. Our ideal sweet spot is in sort of the $2 to $10 million range. That is sort of, perfect size company. It's a little bit smaller than where we're at now, but we ultimately see that something we're comfortable with. We're looking at sort of all options, right? So ultimately, our ultimate range is 2 million to 50 million. Anything on the larger end, we see it as like, okay, this will be a big undertaking. This is going to be our primary focus of what we're going to do. Anything on the lower end, this is okay. This is an add-on or a bolt-on to what we're existing what we're currently doing.
Yeah, but I think your advantage over a lot of companies that look to scale is you already have a lot of that structure in place. You have the management, you have the understanding, you have the age of, you've built that whole infrastructure over many years. You've got those
Yeah,
key personnel in place that you like, trust, and respect do those jobs, and you can go off and do something else and leave them to do it. I think that's a key part of what you've got, which not everyone's got when they're trying to build a group, and that's where we come in, that we
yeah,
can help you with the missing parts as much as possible. Like Steve's CFO, we've all got our different skill sets that
yeah,
we bring to the table when you're helping. And we've obviously got the synergy group structure, which helps you to grow those companies when you've got those holes in your strategy, so to speak.
yeah, absolutely. That's one of the the key differentiators with Synergy or working with somebody like Synergy. You guys have the systems processes. They're all clear, they're defined, they're documented, as well as you have, you know, brilliant teams, right? Like you mentioned, you have Steve, you have yourself, you have Gavin. You guys are you're all brilliant in your own way, and you add the overall value to the pie, which is it's invaluable. Like you and I meet regularly, Robin. The
Yeah.
value that you provide, and even just that, I'll come in the meeting thinking one thing, and by the time I leave, you flip me upside down. I say, oh shit, this is actually how I should be tackling it, right? So
Yeah,
it
thanks for that.
definitely adds a lot of value.
No,
No, for
it's
sure.
yeah. I mean, we've had some interesting conversations for sure. I mean, the thing is that with any business group, it doesn't matter what it is from my perspective. When you're looking from a higher level into it, you can always be more strategic. And that's back to that level one, two, three, and four. I think that is
Yeah,
more important than most people realize, because if you're with your peers, and like I often sit and come into meetings with business owners, and just being sat behind, um, which is rare for me, and I don't say it to kind of like see all the mistakes that are being made,
yeah,
which you don't necessarily see when you're sat on. That's very true of running a bit close to running your business,
yeah,
all the different. Um,
yeah,
but I think having a wider group, a network, being synergy groups where we can really help you get to that next level, is far more important than necessarily hiring that next person. Because when you hire someone, you're not taking that same position. They're not sitting on the same level as you. They're not.
yeah.
You always want to try and get yourself up to the next level. Well, if somebody's there helping you up, it's much easier, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
absolutely. They're
I don't
sort
know
of
what
dragging
you
you
think.
up as opposed to lifting you up, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I,
So coming back to the sorts of companies that would be on the acquisition list for 2026. So you mentioned there about the type, the sweet spot of company, but sort of ideal world, what would be the type of company that you would bring in next to the group?
Right. Yeah. So good question. Ideal company, we've looked at quite a few different options, right? So engineering firms are very interesting to us. We see a good potential synergy and a good potential there within the group to add value on both the Caribbean side as well as the Canada side. Um, Competitors, those are very interesting. Other pump service, when I say competitors, right, loosely, it's a big market, it's a big world. Ultimately, people who are providing the same thing, but maybe in a different way, a different geographical location, even direct competitors. We'd be interested in acquiring other pump companies. Um, Next would be additional services, like I mentioned, supply to HVAC companies, any sort of HVAC supply or even HVAC services, anything within that sort of industry is very interesting to us. Plumbing, electrical, same on both fronts. Um, Again, keeping in mind that we don't want to compete with our existing customers, right? So we're very clear on that front.
And are there
You know,
certain types of pump company that are more interesting than others? So just to give you an example, we were working with an MSP, telco MSP. They wanted to
right,
acquire IT MSPs so that they could sort of
right.
cross-sell and vice versa. So I was just wondering if there are particular types of pump companies that make the deal even more attractive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so again, geographical location is always a thing, right? So, excuse me, Hart Pump, we're primarily Toronto focused, right? But we're in one side of Toronto. If we found a location that was, say, in the other side of Toronto, that would be a prime, they are competitors within that space. So we say, okay, if we just took on their existing company, same services, same things, there's other product lines. Like, for example, if we sell Armstrong pumps and somebody sells a different type of pump, we'd be very interested in sort of taking on that product line, as well as, their location in itself is a valuable asset. Other things like, for example, we buy a lot of control panels to sell along with our pumps, right? If there's a control panel shop that they're making these control panels, instead of us buying it from, this other guy or even the guy we're currently buying from, we could buy from ourselves, right? So that would very much be interesting to us. And those are actually some of the few acquisitions that we are looking at. It's, existing competitors. It's products that we already buying from others that we would like to buy ourselves, like the panels that I mentioned, the plumbing fittings, things like that. Let me see. Good question. What else? I've loosely considered this, but for example, we have trucks on the road, right? So we spend a lot of money every year on just fixing our trucks on the road. So I'm loosely considering, okay, should we buy a small mechanic shop that also focuses on contractors who will have large fleets, right? That could be a potential option. It's not my core focus, but it is an idea that we've sort of considered. One thing Rob has taught me is, you look for all the things that you think might be an acquisition target, what sounds nice, right? But look at your profit and loss statement. Look at where you're spending money and then see if there's potential opportunity for acquisitions within that.
I mean, one of the
Does that sort of
things
answer
that,
your question?
oh, sorry for interrupting. One of the things that I always remember is the example of the New York Times groups I think I've ever seen. They owned everything from the forest in South America to the paper mill to the trucking company that took the stuff to the port. They owned the shipping company. They owned the up to New York. They
Right.
when it landed in New York press, they had the marketing company. They had the
Right.
everything. They controlled literally to your desk. The New York Times went.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So that in itself is very,
oh, I need
that's a beautiful model.
yeah, they lit the whole supply chain. Necessarily
Yeah.
need when you're acquiring companies, you don't necessarily need to go and buy 20 pump companies. You go and
Yeah.
buy your supply chain. And sometimes that's actually a better option because then if there's economic issues and things like that, you can control your supply chain. End of the
Yeah.
day, you're in a much stronger position than everyone else. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that is very much where we see it going,
So we're about
acquiring the
halfway
things that,
through today, and I just wanted to see if there was any questions. Are there any questions, Steve? I noticed I saw something pop up.
Just the one come through. I mean, it's really the definition of the types of pumps that you're selling, I guess, Luke, is the first question we've got.
right. Yeah, that's a very good question. So what is a pump company, right? So, I mentioned it's water pumps essentially, right? So you could think in your house, not every house has this because some of them are fed from the city line, right? But some houses, let's say in a rural area, they have a water well or they have something like that has water, they need to get it into their faucet, right? So a pump basically takes that water, it moves it from the well to the faucet. Now, we don't necessarily work on the residential side, that's just the example. But if you imagine you have it in your house, we primarily deal with municipalities, industrial plants, commercial facilities, right? High rise buildings is a huge market for us. So imagine a high rise building, you have a 50-story building and you have water coming in at the bottom floor. How do you get the water from that bottom floor to the 50th floor? You need a pump down in that basement, as well as the heating systems. They're all based on water, right? So every building over 10 stories, let's say, has water systems, just moving water around, hot water to keep the building warm, to get hot water in your taps. You need pumps to move that water around all the time.
Yeah.
That's essentially in a nutshell what we focus on.
Okay,
Fantastic.
you've got me thinking now. Sorry, is there any more questions, Steve?
Yeah, there are. So I take it when you build a group and buy your supply chain, the group is just as valuable as multiple same industry companies.
it can actually be worth more for the very reason that you control your complete supply chain. If somebody's trying to get into that or competitive market, then you've got a premium because you are the only source of truth, so to speak, for that whole product from pillar to post.
Yeah. Any other questions coming through, guys?
No, I think that's it. Okay, so on that note, just popping back to what you were just saying there, Luke,
Mhm.
you've obviously done the transition, which a lot of companies never do, is you become semi-international because obviously your core business is back in Trinidad, you're up in
Yeah,
Toronto, and you're running it as one group.
yeah.
Therefore, your targets are global, yes? Even though, or are you
Ultimately, yeah.
going to stick there because you perfectly live?
I wouldn't say global. We're not opposed to looking globally. Like for example, I had an opportunity in Colombia the other day. We ultimately didn't. We decided Colombia is not really the market for us. Ultimately, one of the big deciding factors is I don't speak Spanish. I don't know anyone that speaks Spanish, right? Maybe I could learn Spanish, but to do an acquisition and learn Spanish at the same time might be a little tough, right? Um, our core focus is ultimately, we are focused in the Caribbean, but we see more organic growth plans there. Again, we would be interested in acquisitions there, as well as North America. So we're focused primarily on Canada right now. We're open to looking at, America as a whole. That's really where our core focus is North America and the Caribbean. And within North America, Canada's, the market that we're currently in.
Yeah, because on a commercial, basically what you're talking about, you do pumps, don't you?
Come again?
Any type of commercial pump, that are used by industry, that's primarily what you do. And governments and
Yeah,
defense
yeah.
departments. So somewhere like the US or Australia would be prime markets because they have very big uh, needs for those types of things, especially
Yeah,
in Australia.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
so major markets of, major markets as well as developing markets, like the Caribbean's, essentially a developing market. Anywhere in the world there's pumps, right? Um,
yeah,
our comfort level is, yeah, mainly North America and the Caribbean, mainly because that's the type of market that we know. So,
yeah.
the customers are more or less the same. They might be buying different products, but you know how they think, you know how they buy, those things. We've considered Europe and other countries like that. But again, we don't have that level of familiarity yet. Maybe in the future we might, but as of today, we're not quite there.
As a totally a weird aside, I used to live in what was old Eastern Europe. So I used to live in Lithuania, and
Right.
90% of all the buildings there have government-run central heating systems that come from one central core, right?
Right.
So
So,
every
so you see a little intricacy like that I wouldn't even think of. And so those are the little things that I say, all right, you know what? We know exactly what people are buying, how they're buying it. Let's stick to
yeah,
North America for now. It's a big enough market that we can very much get what we
yeah,
need to get done.
it is slightly annoying actually because it comes on and when it goes off. Right? But anyway, that's besides the point.
Right.
So what's okay? So we go back. Let's recap on some of the things that we've gone through. So your target companies that if they're on the call today and you say, right, okay, this is the types of companies we want. It's not just pump companies. Have you already identified the ones that don't fit directly under your vertical?
Yeah. Are you talking a level of size or industry or both, maybe?
At different allied industries, have you looked through your accounts and seeing where you spend most money and what could be those strategic acquisitions rather than industry acquisitions?
Yeah. So strategic, just from our, operational costs standpoint, like you mentioned, shipping is always a thing. We spend a lot of money just shipping pumps out to different customers. So we've considered buying smaller regional trucking companies or things like that that can offer that courier services, right? We send products out to our customers. Just if a customer needs something within 2 hours, we call a courier and send them out. We might buy a small fleet of courier or even a whole courier company, and we're just one of the customers within that. Um, what else?
Oh,
Outsource
fleet maintenance you
accounting.
mentioned. maintenance earlier. So something like a fleet maintenance company that could look after the fleet of vehicles that you could possibly run,
Yeah,
a logistics company, those sorts of things.
yeah. So that would be fantastic. Fleet maintenance. Even a small car dealership. We buy, a few trucks every couple of years. Other contractors buy a lot of trucks. We might consider looking at that. We outsource some of our accounts and some of our back office support. We might look at a outsourced provider. Now all those things have changed a little bit with AI and everything, but there's still a need for the service there, like payroll services and what have you. Um,
What about
Electrical.
smaller operators? What about
Mhm.
much smaller? A few years ago, I was at a networking event, and a guy came up to me and said he was looking to retire, and he was a solopreneur, and he had no way out of the business because when you're either a level one or two, so you've got just yourself or just an apprentice, you can't really
Yeah,
exit your business. It's incredibly difficult to do. So, do you have a way of actually absorbing those? If they came and knocked on your door and said, "Hey, look, Luke, I'm looking to retire in the next 5 years. Um, could you give me a job in return for me giving you my client base, for argument's sake?" I don't know, something along those lines. That's basically what I suggested to this guy, that you turn up to a larger plumber
yeah,
and say, here's my client base, give me a job for the next 5 years, kind of thing.
yeah.
Would you
Those
be
are
prepared to look at much smaller operators, is what I was guessing at.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's our focus or our target, but I wouldn't be opposed to having discussions with those type of operators and seeing whether there's a fit within the company for sure. Um,
Yeah.
just first thinking, in a scenario like that, geographic location would very much be a thing. Like if I found one out in, I don't know, Texas, for example, and it was a small one-man show, I might be less inclined to bring that in within. But let's say there's a smaller pump company in Toronto or even a service company, we very much consider that and just bring them in under our team and roll like that.
So what else would be a bad fit? So we've touched on the geography as being one sort of major consideration, but are there
Yeah.
other things that would instantly rule them out for you?
Yeah, like, I'm not going to buy a supermarket or a restaurant or things like that are the obvious. I don't think that we add much value there. Um, yeah, I don't have like a specific thing in mind. I know what I'm focusing on, and don't necessarily really consider much outside of that. There have been scenarios where we're presented with a good opportunity, and we will consider it. If financials look good, it could be a new interesting market. Like even my supermarket example, if I found a great supermarket runs itself and it makes great profitability, why not consider it, right? But I would say that's not really our core focus. Our core focus is what we're doing, where we add the most value, and that's
So,
essentially engineering, pump companies, service companies, and product distribution.
yeah. So from your existing businesses, how much information do you get on the financial performance of your companies, and how do you see that changing as you add more businesses to the group?
Yeah. So ultimately, one of the, we have the Merry Group, which is the overall group, and then we have the operating companies, right? For the most part, both companies operate at pretty much a decentralized level. But actually, finance and accounting is one of the things that we have at more of a centralized level. So we have essentially one core team, with each having their own little pods within the existing companies. But that's more or less, on the balance sheet level, it's up at the top, the P&L. We have the general manager at this company, the general manager at that company running their own P&L.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're generating monthly financial reports. Every month we sit with our accounts and finance team and saying, all right, where we at? Where we at against budget? Are we going to make budget? What decisions do we need to make if we're not making budget? Yeah, does that sort of answer your question, Steve?
It does. Yeah, fantastic. I don't have any other questions coming through. Anything that anybody wants to ask?
Is have we answered both those questions? Yes, we
We
have.
have. Yeah, we've been through both now.
Yeah, okay, no worries. Yeah, so if there's any other questions, please put them in the Q&A box. So, shall we just go back to what do you see as one of the biggest difficulties in your industry over the current phase and coming up that might business owners in the same sector as you might run into, and you
Right.
think you've got a handle on that moving forward?
Yeah, I would say, industry-wide, one thing that everyone complains about is people, right? Finding the right people, keeping the right people. Everyone struggles with this. We struggle with this sometimes, right? Um, Ultimately, it's identifying the right people, training them, and also giving them, a place to stay once they're trained up. Um, I would say that's probably the biggest constraint industry-wide, um, as well as balancing that with the demand, right? The sales demand. So it's always a constant balance of finding the right people, having enough people, but not too many people, and then balancing that against your sales. So that's ultimately,
Okay, with your that's great answer. With your management team, when you're hiring, so you've got your operational staff, I get that. But now let's go to your management team. When you're hiring your management team or appointing them or whatever, what's your methodology there? Are you can they earn their way up? Do you bring them in for specialist skills? What's the normal methodology in the company?
yeah, absolutely. So we've actually done both. So one thing that we do is an annual planning session, and we actually do quarterly planning sessions within that. One of our core focuses within that session is looking at our organizational chart, the structure, what gaps we're seeing, and what gaps need to be filled. So that's sort of where we start, is making a clear org chart. What seats do we need to be filled? And then step two is we look at all options of who is the best person to fill that seat, right? What actually needs to be done? Who is the best person to fill it? So I'll give you an example on the sales side of things, right? So we have our sales seat, we have our operations seat, we have our finance seat. We have people for both the operation and finance. This year we found we don't actually have someone dedicated to the sales seat. So in that scenario, we looked at all the internal parties. We said, okay, we don't actually have a sales lead within our companies right now. So now let's go external. And essentially, when I'm looking for that sales lead, I'm saying, all right, does this guy know exactly what he's talking about better than I even know? So I'm not trying to hire below me in a role like that. I'm actually trying to hire someone who could do the role much better than I could ever do it. And ultimately, in that particular scenario, we found the person. He does sales like I couldn't do sales, right? And he runs our teams and things like that much better than I could. So that scenario, we looked outside and we actually found a good fit. He had worked at Home Depot and all sorts of different things, managing sales teams, and that brought a valuable asset to our company. On the operations side, we did something completely different. We looked at outside people. This was about a year prior, but we needed an operations manager. So we looked at all the different outside people. They had good candidates, but ultimately we found there was somebody within our company that had the experience both on the hands-on level as well as the comfort level with the teams, and everyone knew him. And so we promoted him up to the operations manager level and filled that spot. We've actually done some intercompany hiring as well. So our finance manager for Hart Pump, she was previously the finance manager engaged, and actually now she's managing the two, and we've elevated her more to the group level. But she was sort of a shining star within the engaged team, and we said, all right, we have a gap there on the Hart Pump side. Come and help us with Hart Pump. You get the two working up to speed. We're going to bring you up to the group level. So that's in a nutshell how we've done it, and what's worked for us.
And that's
We
very
do look at
interesting
a
because
mix.
yeah, I was just about to ask you. So you've got your operational management team, and now you've got a group management team, yes, that
Yeah,
you're building out. Yeah.
yeah.
Have you fully built that out, or have you still got slots to fill?
I would say we've still got slots to fill, and we're still working on it.
Right.
It's
And
never
that,
going to be perfect, right? It's an ever evolving thing, in my opinion.
yeah, I agree. So from my perspective, on the group management level, because they're not so operational, for me, it's about what you bring to the table. You're not doing a job anymore. It's about you have to bring value to the company. You should be an income center, not a cost center. So the cost
Yeah,
center are the operational staff. I know they're not all, but in a very high level view. But for me,
yeah,
the group management and above should be like if you want to sit there or above, what value are you bringing in? Yeah,
yeah.
because you've got to add value at that point, in my opinion. I don't know what you think, Steve and Gavin.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in that point, and I'm also just tempted to sort of come back to the industry issue with recruitment as well, because I think one of the things that you often see acquisitive groups go after where they've got that issue is to acquire a training
Yeah.
or a recruitment business. And in actual fact, I was working with the owners of a water treatment company a few years back in the UK. And
Right.
they took the decision ultimately to set up their own training and recruitment business. They were looking at acquiring some as well.
Right.
Um, where you've got a number one challenge for the industry, that is one side as well that is worth exploring.
Yeah. I didn't mention that or even think about when you guys asked, but recruitment is something, it's very much something we've considered because we use recruitment firms and things like that. And we know what works in our industry and what doesn't. So we have actually considered that as a viable path for acquisition or even for, you know, starting a greenfield recruitment firm.
So we've got another question come through. So can you speak around getting funding from the banks for acquisitions in Canada?
Yeah. Um, yeah, ultimately, I mean, it's a process like any other, right? Um, there are, there's the big four banks, your TDs, your RBC, your CIBC. We found, and actually, there's also the government-sponsored bank, which is the BDC, Business Development Bank of Canada. Now, we found, there's good and bad with any other. They have their pros, their strengths, and their weaknesses, right? Um, Ultimately, we worked with TD on our Hart Pump acquisition on the bank funding financing side of things. They had, what do I say? They had strong interest rates. When I say, the price was right essentially on that front, which is why we ultimately ended up going with them. Um, and there was, a number of varying factors. Ultimately, the banks want to see, are you over leveraging this company? Can the company sustain the level of debt that you're taking on to acquire this company? And if not, they're not going to be interested at all. They're quite strict in their in their underwriting and things like that. BDC may be a little bit more flexible because they're government sponsored. They want to fuel the economy and things like that. But ultimately, all the banks are going to see, okay, have you done your quality of earnings? So they're going to want an accountant to check through everything, say, are the earnings they're reporting even accurate? And then from there's, can those earnings support the debt that we're about to give you? And that's ultimately what they want to see. It is very much a process, and you have to present them your business plan. There's previous financials as well as what are you going to do with the company once you've acquired it? Are you the right person to acquire it? They ask all these questions, and actually, it's a good process because it forces you to think about these questions yourself and see what you're missing. But yeah, at a high level, that's really you approach the bank with your quality of earnings and your business plan. You tell them what you plan to do it, and then they either accept or deny your request, and then you go through that.
Yeah, fantastic. That's all the questions from my side.
Yeah. So what's got you excited for the next 12 months with the Merry Group? What gets you up in the
So
morning? What gets you really motivated to get going?
that's a very good question. There's two things, maybe three things. The one thing that gets me up is I love what I'm doing. Every day I get up and I like building the company. I like building the group. I like looking at the strategic direction. Where are we going? How are we going to do that? There's the challenges day to day, right? So today I may be short on technicians or one guy called in sick. Or, there's obviously I'm not dealing with that day to day, but you're seeing these things and your team comes to you and says, hey, what do you think we should do here? Like, I have all these ideas, and you're dealing with them and trying to solve problems, right? It's a constant loop of solving problems. And ultimately, every problem is an opportunity. Like, I was talking to my finance manager, and she was going through all these issues in her head. And I was like, do you realize how exciting this is? Like, imagine there's all these things that aren't working, and we're still up on sales. We're still making money. We're still doing well. Imagine if everything was perfect, how well we would actually do. So those things excite me, right? You're seeing all these problems, and if you fix them, there's only more to be, there's only more growth that comes from it. That excites me, and very much more on, getting down to it. What really excites me for the next 12 months is growing the sales team. Like I mentioned, we hired a new sales manager within the last year. So seeing that team grow and develop, we've recently hired some good people on that front that are bringing so much wealth and experience from other companies, and it's opening a whole new world. So growing the existing sales for our companies, as well as sort of further integrating and stepping up to that level for strategic direction, things like that, as well as acquisitions. Like we want to buy at least one company. I know, Rob, you've pushed me. You said you should be buying 5, right? Not one.
Yeah.
So that's
I think
pushed me a
you're
little bit outside my
definitely
comfort zone.
one's not enough. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, that very much excites me. The acquisition side of it, that's what I've always wanted to do. That's what got me into the business in the first place. And that is really overall else what excites me is doing more of what I know works well in as many companies as we can do it in.
So, well, you can put your contact details at the end of this webinar, but what's the best way if a company's watched this webinar and gone, okay, I'd like to have a chat with you? What's the best point of contact? Is it to reach out to you on LinkedIn, an
Yeah,
email?
I
What
would
would you
say
prefer?
the best way is probably send me a connection request on LinkedIn, shoot me a message, and that would be, really on the acquisition front, or even if you want to learn more about what we're working on, if you want some questions, whatever. LinkedIn is a good platform for that for sure.
Okay. And is there anything in particular that you would like to say to those potential business owners that would put their mind at rest, that they're in that right sweet spot? I know we've gone over a number of different points,
Yeah.
but is there anything in particular that you have on that note?
Yeah, ultimately, if you spend your career building a great company, you're within the range of 2 to 50 million, and you believe you might be a good potential fit, we'd very much be interested in talking to you. We love engineering firms. We love pump companies. We love all sorts of industrial services. So, if you are remotely interested in looking at what we could offer as a group, we'd be happy to chat with you. Even outside of that, I love talking to business owners. If you're a business owner at all, come and chat with me. I love these discussions.
Great, thanks for that, Luke. So, thank you for joining the call today, Luke. It's been very insightful. I really appreciate your time today, and I'm sure our co-hosts have enjoyed listening to you
Very
on
much
the
so.
webinar. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, well, thank you guys for the platform. Thanks for having me on. Rob, Steve, Gavin, it's been amazing. So thank you very much.